Hi, I'm John Nerrell, and welcome to the Mid-Career GPS podcast. If you're feeling stuck in your career and overwhelmed by what steps to take, I can help you. As an executive and career transition coach, I help my clients prepare, position, and promote who they are and what they do to show up and find a job they love or love the job they have. It's time to start building your mid-career GPS. So let's get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome back. So today we're going to talk about career clarity. Now, let me start by saying that if you aren't decisive or clear in the direction you see yourself professionally going, you are exactly where you need to be today. Whether you've been listening to this podcast for a while or it's your first time listening, I'm all about helping you show up to find the job you'll love or love the job you have. And sometimes that just means we may be feeling a little bit lost or uncertain. Now, maybe you're super clear on where you're at professionally, and as you're listening today, you just want to learn more about maintaining that career clarity to help you get to whatever or wherever is next for you. So I'm excited to introduce today's guest because if there is a job out there, Lisa Lewis Miller has probably done it. Lisa's a career change expert, author, and the founder of Career Clarity, a company that helps individuals step into their careers they've been dreaming of. Lisa's path evolved into coaching after working in digital marketing for nearly a decade at companies like 2U, Edelman, the American Cancer Society, Teen Vogue, 17, Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, and CBS College Sports. Lisa's been featured in the Washington Post, Business Insider, U.S. News and World Report, Fast Company, Refinery 29, and more. And Lisa's also received her coaching certification as one of only 7 coaches in the world trained in the pivot method. Lisa strongly advocates for and helps her clients achieve the career happiness they've been looking for. So please welcome Lisa Lewis Miller. Hi, Lisa.
Hello, John. It's such a pleasure to get to be here with you today.
Same here. You know, we had an opportunity to connect last year through Olivia Jarris's Empower Her Summit, and we got to connect afterwards and everything. And so knowing your story a little bit like I do, I wanted to have you on the podcast to just share it and talk a little bit more about your career journey. So at a really high level, Lisa, when you think about all the things that you've done, what's gotten you here today?
Oh, it's such a meaty question to start out with here. And that kind of question is so interesting because it really asks you to, I almost imagine somebody who is rowing in a boat. And when you're in a boat, you are looking the direction that you came from. You can't see where you're going, but you can see the water that you have already been through, the shoreline that you left. And being able to take a retrospective look and put the puzzle pieces together is such a gift. And it can feel high stakes. So when I think about putting the puzzle pieces together retrospectively, and I look at the entrepreneurial work that I do right now, and having been out on my own as an entrepreneur for quite some time, it feels like the decisions and the points that led me to this place would have never seen this as being my landing place, would have never seen this as being where I end up. But the decisions that led me here started with a lot of tiny decisions and tiny moments that helped for me to grow a sense of confidence, capability, self-assuredness, and a sense that I could catch myself if I fell. So I'll start by saying that in my undergrad education, I was an economics major, and I think that approach to thinking about financial management and risk has affected the way that I navigated career questions and decisions over the course of my career and life. Because I always wanted to marry together the sense of energy and excitement and enthusiasm for the work with a very left brain, logical, rational kind of approach to make sure that I wasn't taking on too much risk, that I was being thoughtful and careful and strategic about my steps. So, over the course of my career, I took a number of different steps and moves to test out and vet and validate different types of work environments for myself. I had a stint in nonprofits. I had a stint in consulting. I had a stint in startups. And even previous to that, I had a stint with media companies and I had a stint with a big national nonprofit as opposed to a smaller one. And each of those different moves and decisions that I made were helping me to refine a specific point of view on who I was, what I wanted, and what kind of environment was going to be the most life giving for me. And so the fact that I am an entrepreneur now and have been for years is the product of almost taking a Goldilocks style approach to my career and looking for that ideal bowl of porridge and realizing, okay, there are some things about a nonprofit environment that could potentially work well, but there are other pieces that don't feel right. Okay, working for a media company has some things that feel very shiny and glamorous and exciting, but that doesn't feel sustainable and good either. Consulting has a huge opportunity for growth, and I'm working on lots of interesting work, but I'm not finding the kind of commitment to advancing a cause that I'm looking for. And the startup space allowed me to get to help build something from an early stage to be bigger and better and profitable. But I found that the organizational culture and some of the dynamics within the company and within the team just were not going to feel good for me in the long term. So each of those Goldilocks esque steps and moves continued to give me additional refinement and clarity in my own path about what felt good and what felt right for me, and gave me that sense of certainty that, man, if I can't find the type of environment that feels life giving for me in any of these different organizations, maybe it really is time to give myself permission to look at that entrepreneurial dream and see if I can make that work.
I love that in just the exact way you phrase that. I'm going to give myself permission. And how oftentimes do we see in the people we work alongside of, even the people we help, that being able to come from that place where you're going to give yourself permission to explore or examine or reflect upon whatever is next. In your work, how critical is that to this whole career clarity process that you share?
You are right to pick up on that, John, because the giving yourself permission piece is vital. And it's vital in so many different ways of navigating career change. There's giving yourself permission to even think about career change. And that has so many layers of giving yourself permission to step into a new and different identity or a new and different flavor of identity from what you have been looking at before. Giving yourself permission that your academic path or your previous professional path does not have to dictate the only moves you're allowed to make into your future can feel world altering and life giving. Giving yourself permission to look outside of the path that might have been prescribed for you by your supervisor, by your team, by your organization. That feels like such an act of rebellion and liberation in a lot of ways. But even across the entire arc of a career change journey, there are different moments where you have to have a really loving, gentle conversation with yourself about continuing to have permission, right? I'm even thinking before you start the career change journey, giving yourself permission to be unhappy and
Oh,
that you don't have to just gratitude shame yourself and like, I should like this more. I should appreciate that I have a job. I should blah, blah, blah. I should be more grateful. I should try to make the best of this situation. I should look on the bright side. Even giving yourself permission to say, you know what? I am unhappy and I am allowed to be unhappy. And I can be both grateful for the things that are good and unhappy with the things that are not good at the same time feels like an act of rebellion.
Oh, without question. And what we have seen as a result of 2020 and the pandemic and the periods of record unemployment and the periods who people who found jobs only to lose them again, right? We have that faction of people, if you will, who were like who have double lost their jobs during the pandemic for a variety of reasons. It's almost like that kind of survivor guilt where I have the job and if you're getting paid really well, even better in that regard, right? But then that guilt comes in about I can't complain. I can't say something to my best friend who's lost their job, or I can't make it seem like I'm being ungrateful because that's just not the way I want to show up right now.
Oh, yeah. It's one part survivor guilt, it's one part Stockholm syndrome
Yeah.
of I'm here and I have a job and my company hasn't treated me real well through the pandemic, or my boss is revealing more and more that they may be narcissistic, they may be abusive, they may be all these things. But because this is what I have right now, maybe that's okay. Maybe that's what I deserve. Maybe this is just what working is like at a certain level. And so navigating the complexity of the survival guilt and the Stockholm syndrome and all of that to give yourself permission to say, you know what, if this feels like a B plus or a C, I deserve the opportunity to at least go look and see where the A is and if an A is even out there, can feel like a real belief and attitude revolution.
So well said, right? And when you look at career professionals and you find that they're unhappy, does being unhappy, is that synonymous with being in a career rut, or is that something different from your lens?
They can be synonymous, but it's worth peeling back the layers to understand what each person's unique situation is. For some people, and this is, I'll say too that in the work that I do, I use this methodology called the 4 pillars of career fulfillment. And we can totally get into those here in a moment in the conversation. But what I've seen is that there are 4 core drivers of satisfaction and fit in your work. And if one of them is out of alignment for you, it feels like that piece is unsatisfying. That's typically where career ruts come from, where not everything is bad. You can see objectively on paper, there are some things that are absolutely in alignment with your values and feel good, but something's amiss and that you feel an obligation to shake something up in there.
Mhm.
So usually a career rut is where a little piece is out of alignment. You're not growing and learning as much as you want to. You're bored with solving the same problems on the same team every single day. You feel like your supervisor is not challenging you or supporting you in meeting your challenges, or you plateaued in terms of your compensation. I think that larger unhappiness tends to come up when more than one of the 4 pillars is out of whack. And that's when you may be inching into bigger career rejuvenation questions of, do I need to move externally to this organization? Do I need to move into a new industry? Am I ready to step into a totally different role function and be challenged and stretched in a new way? So I think that getting really clear with yourself on the contributing factors to the rut and doing some really thoughtful internal inventorying can be really prescriptive about what next steps and what path forward are going to help you get back into alignment given your situation.
Okay, so to layer on that extra piece of context here, so for everybody, can you walk us through what the 4 pillars are of career fulfillment?
Absolutely. So the 4 pillars of career fulfillment, they each have a title and they each have a corresponding core question that goes with them. So I'll walk you through them one by one. Pillar number 1 of the 4 pillars is the strengths and gifts pillar. So, in order to feel like a job is fulfilling and sustainable, you need to feel like you are bringing your gifts to the table and that you are growing in your gifts. And when I think about strengths and gifts, a lot of people make that synonymous with your capabilities. And I find that to be a really challenging and potentially misleading way to think about your strengths and gifts, because I'm certain every single person listening to this podcast is incredibly capable.
Mhm.
There's a ton of stuff that you can do. But just because you can do it does not mean that you like doing it. It does not mean that you get energy from doing it. It does not mean that you want to keep doing it and grow in that way. It doesn't mean that you get natural motivation from that work. It doesn't mean that you gravitate towards that and want to do it. So, the core question that comes up when you think about your strengths and gifts is, out of all the things that I can do, what is the subsegment that give me energy, that get me excited, and that I want to double down on doing more of, both in my current role and getting to stretch and grow into in my current and future roles? And even if that you take one thing away from this podcast, and that's the only thing that you write down, that question can be very directional of giving yourself permission to not have to do all of the things that you know how to do, and to curate and be thoughtful and strategic and intentional and a little bit selfish to
Mhm.
say, of all the areas where I can contribute, these are the ones that light me up the most, where I will be able to outperform and overperform, where I'm excited about doubling down on, and where, if I get to work in these, my employment is going to be most life giving and most sustainable over time.
And to your point earlier, Lisa, it's that point sometimes where people can very easily gloss over it, or they don't tend to dig into that kind of conversation. It's like that quintessential battle between, am I a generalist or am I a specialist? And we often find that a lot of the happiness lives in not only recognizing and acknowledging what the specialty is, but then having the opportunities to do it.
Well, and I'll even expand on that a bit to say that some people are very energized by more generalist types of skills and capabilities and
Mhm.
gifts. So it's really a question of self-knowledge
Yes.
of out of all the things that you can do you tend to like to go into some of the more specialty technician
Mhm.
kinds of places, or do you like to be in a more broad or cross-functional or overarching kind of a role? Because even just that amount of knowledge will help you to figure out what roles you should be looking at, what roles you want to apply for, how to think about and talk about yourself as a candidate, how you want to position yourself on paper, the whole shebang.
Mhm.
So it's that level of digging into who you are, what you want, and being unapologetic about it allows you to have choices and make decisions through a different lens, right? It does not mean that you may find the single perfect role where all you do is only what energizes you.
Mhm.
But if you don't know what energizes you, it is very easy to accept a role that is full of drainers or full of things that you know how to do, but don't bring you joy and don't bring you life. And then to feel confused and frustrated and swirling that I thought I took this new job to feel better. I thought I was going to have opportunities for growth, and I don't know why.
Good point. Absolutely. And great use of the word swirling. Um, like how you wove that in there. Because as soon as you said it, it just painted this really vivid picture for me about that kind of turmoil or emotion going on there. So props to that. I may steal that one. That was good.
Please
So
do.
what's the second pillar?
Okay, pillar number 2 is your magnetic interests. And a lot of people use the word passions here. And if that word resonates with your listeners, fabulous. What I tend to find is that high performers, high achievers, when they hear the word passion, immediately associate it with this mental pressure cooker of, oh gosh, I need to know my one purpose, my one calling, my one singular mission, why I was born onto this planet. And I come from the school of thought that you're allowed to be dynamic and evolve and have your areas of interest and the areas where you make a contribution change and grow throughout the course of your life, because as you learn more, your eyes will be open to new and different things. So I try to use less pressure filled language of your magnetic interests to look at all the different areas that have some sense of curiosity or some sort of tug at you that you would be interested in doubling down on or helping an organization with problems around. So the core question for your magnetic interest is, out of all the things that you're interested in, what's the subsegment that you would be most interested in solving problems around for an organization, a business, a nonprofit, a whatever? And this then can help you to get clear on what's the sector or the industry that I want to be in. And does the sector or industry that I'm in right now still align with my area of interest? What's the organization that calls to me within that space? So, who has a really interesting theory of change that feels like it's in alignment with my interests? And then, what kind of a team makes sense for me? There are so many people who start out their career on a specific trajectory. Maybe it is in finance, maybe it's marketing, maybe it's operations. And they will oftentimes hit a plateau where they can keep growing in that trajectory, but they just don't care about those questions and those problems anymore.
Right.
And so giving yourself permission to say, there might be a way for me to make a pivot. And maybe I've done ops for all of my life, but I'd love to move into marketing analytics or marketing ops, and maybe then use that as a pathway into overseeing marketing for the organization. That can help to bring a little bit more spice and a little bit more life into your work, especially if you feel trapped because you have created your whole career in one specific area of interest and you're noticing it doesn't feel as good anymore, but you also feel like you don't know how to move your experiences and your skills and your background into a new arena effectively.
Nice. And I think it's a great way to kind of reframe or redefine that whole passion term. I'm doing the air quotey thing. Nobody can see this, but I'm doing the air quotey thing, right? Because you hear that sometimes, it can almost make you kind of go like, oh, like I don't know, but that magnetic interest really kind of resonates and lands really well in this conversation. So
Good.
what's the third pillar?
Well, let me say just to that passions point,
Yeah,
that I think one of the other important things about the term passion is that there's no secret law that says that your career has to be your passion.
correct.
You are absolutely allowed to have passions that are bigger than or that have no intersection points with what you do in your day to day work. For some people, that sounds like an abomination because it feels really important to have a sense of interest and excitement and engagement with their work that falls into that passion bucket. And if that is you, keep doing you. This is not meant to tell you to go get a job that you're bored at. But for other people, maybe you have a passion for ballroom dancing or ultra marathons or for writing fiction novels. You're allowed to have that be a totally separate area of fulfillment for you in your life. And it doesn't have to be the pressure that your passion has to be the driver of money in your life. And I'm sure there are people listening who can say, oh, yeah, I know somebody who tried to turn their passion into their profession and it sucked the fun right out of it. And it made them resent the work. It took all of the happiness and the curiosity and the exploration out of it. So I feel like magnetic interest just gives you a little bit more room to groove and takes that pressure layer off to create more spaciousness for how you can choose to live your life on your own terms. So that's
So a completely different podcast. I can completely relate to pursuing the passion and then losing all interest in it, or having to reclaim it again. So that's a good placeholder there. Absolutely.
100%. Okay,
Yeah.
well, let me get to part 3 as you asked.
All right.
Pillar number 3 in the 4 pillars methodology is personality fit. And this one, over time, I've been teaching this for a while, and I feel like my understanding of personality fit has evolved over time.
Mhm.
And so, where my understanding of personality fit is for people and how this factors into your happiness and your sustainability in a job is that we all know the experience of quitting a job because you hate your boss or you hate your team or it's a toxic corporate culture or if you look at it on paper, The role was fine, the interest area was in alignment, but you knew in your heart and your gut you could not do it. So personality fit is a bit like this amorphous X factor of how are you wired and what do you value and what kind of environment is going to set you up for success. And that can be your physical environment of, do you want a company that's fully remote? Do you want a company that has a big bullpen with lots of row desks? Do you want a company that has desks with offices and doors and everybody gets to work on their own independently? This is a question of, what are the organization's values that need to be true for you to feel like there's alignment and resonance there? So if you are a big fan of environmental conservation, working for BP is probably not going to be the best fit for you unless they have an incredible like innovation in environmental conservation and alternate energy sources department that you could go be a part of. It's a question of, how do you want to be treated by your boss and by your teammates to enable you to bring more of your full self to work? And in the personality pillar, there is a real element of, what are the identity traits that describe you, that you feel like you belong with, and are those identity traits respected, valued, honored in the kind of workplace that you're going into? Because if you're a cishet white man and you go into an organization that is full of cishet white men, like that might be a perfect fit for you. And you might never experience any sort of personality friction or mismatch because issues never come up for you or for your colleagues. But if you are a person who belongs to an underrepresented identity, whether that is race or ethnicity, whether that is sexual orientation, whether that is gender, whether it's religious, if you find yourself within a team or with a supervisor or within an organization where they are not respectful, where they're not being inclusive, where they're not being thoughtful about their diversity and equity strategy, it's not going to feel good. And you are going to feel like you're fighting an uphill battle every flippin' day. And there are some people who have a theory of change about their organization where they want to be there and they want to fight that battle and they want to change the organization for future employees, for future generations. But sometimes we hit a breaking point and say, you know what, this is not worth what it is taking from me to try to get this organization to come around to the way they should be treating their employees in a more equitable and inclusive way. And if you hit that breaking point, the permission, I feel like we're using permission so much today, but the permission to get the heck out of there and go find an organization where you don't have to fight to be respected and appreciated, and where you can bring more of yourself and your background and your experience to the table is real important. And it's out there. I feel like there are so many people who belong to an underrepresented identity who feel like they have to just sit there and take it and just grin and bear it and just pretend like it doesn't hurt. Pretend like you don't notice the microaggressions. You've stopped bothering to even tell HR about them. And what I want for people to hear and know in this is that if you feel disrespected, if you feel like the organization isn't appreciative of you, your life is too short and the value that you bring to the table is too valuable and too important, too precious to suffer and languish. And there are new organizations popping up every single day that are really devoted to walking their talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Mm-hmm. And creating professional cultures that are not just perpetuating some of the sort of like stereotypical white supremacist norms. So if you're listening to this and any of this is resonating for you or touching a nerve of, oh my gosh, I have been putting up with being gaslit or working for a boss who is low-key racist or low-key sexist or low-key whatever it is, you don't have to. You can stay there as long as you want to. And even in times when the market is upside down, like it feels like it is right now, there are still people who are hiring. And your mental health and your psychological safety in the workplace are worth fighting for.
I couldn't agree with you more.
So the question that comes with pillar 3 is, do I feel like I can bring more of my full self to work? And do I feel psychologically safe and empowered to do my best work here? So that's number 3.
Yeah. It's such a great time to just kind of pause, right? Just to let that sit. There was so many great things there that you said. And I think for anybody that's listening, it really is that call to just examine and reflect on, what are you putting up with? Really examining what that fit looks like, and recognizing that, especially, really, no matter where you're at in your career, but especially if you're sitting at mid career and you have put up with so much of this, you know, do you really want to settle? Is this the point to really settle, or are you willing to take that step to give yourself permission, which has become the recurring theme in this conversation, to really go out there and explore and find what may be next for you? Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right.
Well, let me bring us in for a landing with pillar number
Sure,
4
bring it in.
here.
Okay. Sounds great.
So, pillar number 4 is the lifestyle pillar. And this one is all about how you want work to fit into your life. And that's on a lot of different dimensions, right? That is looking at the compensation range that you want to be in and understanding how much your ideal lifestyle costs and how to achieve your ideal lifestyle so that you don't take roles that are beneath what you need to be making. And you also don't put yourself into a golden handcuff situation where you're actually making a lot more money than what you need to achieve your financial goals, right? I'm all about amassing wealth. I'm all about going for things. I'm
Mhm.
all about living your best life. But it is so often that people feel like they have punched this one-way ticket to more stress, more pressure, more anxiety, more expectation in their career and their life. And sometimes, if you are feeling wildly unhappy and feeling stuck because of these golden handcuffs and you feel like you can't take a pay cut, sometimes being willing to assess, what's my financial strategy? What are my goals? Is it worth it for me to be suffering here? Or can I create the opportunity to maybe have a little bit more flexibility and open up the compensation range that I'm looking in? Can be so liberating. So, this is not to shoot down anybody's like being a wealthy badass dreams here, but just giving another way to look at it and think about it to make sure that you're giving yourself permission to feel good in the doing while you are hustling, striving, achieving, etc. in your life.
Yeah.
So, compensation's a piece,
Mhm.
benefits are a piece. What are the benefits you need to get from your organization? Do you need fabulous healthcare because you are dealing with a chronic illness, or you have a child who has a chronic illness that's going to take fabulous healthcare? Or are you in a position where healthcare is not as big of a factor for you? You don't need to go to the doctor a ton. You're not on a ton of prescriptions. And maybe what's important to you is getting unlimited PTO. And flexibility is an important piece of this. How many hours a week are you expected to work? When are those hours expected to be? How much autonomy do you have in choosing when and how the work gets done? And how much autonomy do you need and want? I think for some of us, this season we have gone through over the last year has affirmed that I love working in person with humans. And this has been so, so hard to be isolated and to work from home. And I can imagine another listener feeling equally strongly of, I have loved working at home and I don't want to have to ever go back to an office if I don't have to. So noticing the truth for you and noticing what you want, again, shapes the way that you make decisions. So the question around the lifestyle pillar is, how do you want work to fit into your life? And what will enable you to feel like work is occupying the appropriate amount of space in your life? Is work sucking up too much air out of the room and it feels oppressive? Is your work not occupying enough space and it doesn't feel like it's using enough of you, and that you are creating the compensation and the benefits that you want? So sitting with that piece and seeing how all 4 of these pillars are defined for you personally and what you prioritize most in each of these pillars can help you to then navigate. Can I make the job that I have one that I love by asking for some changes, for looking at misalignment in one of my pillars and making a request? Or do I feel like I need a new job but I want to get a job that I love, and that these pillars have given me a much more prescriptive sense of the types of traits that that work is going to have, and gives me a way to start brainstorming where to find that kind of work for myself.
Such a great and tactical and tangible explanation of all four of these pillars, because as we've been talking today and I've been listening, they're relatable. They're relatable to anybody wherever they're at. And I hope when people are listening to this, they're bookmarking this episode to go back and listen to it again and pick up things that they've missed. But one of the things that you triggered for me as I was listening to you today was that when we think about our own career development, I have experienced that there is this, I don't know if it's a belief, an expectation that management or the corporation or wherever I'm working is going to take care of me and my professional goals. And we know that doesn't always happen. We know that somewhere along the way, you're going to get a bad boss. You might even get two. You might be having one now, right? And those questions around where do I go when I am not getting professionally fed in my organization? I'm curious for you, like what are the things that you have seen to be really helpful in terms of that kind of advice for a professional, maybe specifically a mid-career professional, to really help them kind of navigate toward whatever's next?
It's such a common place to be, and it's such a painful place to be. It can feel
Yeah.
so oppressive to have worked so hard in your career and then get a boss who does not believe in you, or who doesn't know how to champion you, or who you feel like is actively undermining your growth and progress. There are four people to consult. Person number one to consult is somebody who is external to your organization, who is a peer type person. So somebody who works in a similar kind of function, or maybe in the similar industry or a similar company, who you can just bounce some thoughts and ideas off of to say, I'm languishing, I'm struggling, here is my situation. What ideas or perspective do you have about what's possible? What have you seen with people within your organization? Because having some completely fresh eyes and fresh ears
Mhm.
can oftentimes inject a certain amount of hopefulness and positivity that you may not be feeling in your current situation. So getting somebody who doesn't know all your background, all your baggage, who doesn't know this person's name and information, can be critically helpful. Person number two to go to is somebody who's higher up on the food chain in leadership, who you may have a better or a different relationship with. It could be your boss's boss. It could be the department head. It could be somebody in the executive leadership team. It could be somebody who is your boss's peer, but in a different department. Somebody who's got a bit more of the context, who sees a little bit more of the story, and who knows what the capabilities of the organization are to give you opportunities, be it moving over to a different team or a different project, be it creating a little bit more emotional buffer between you and that supervisor, be it getting to be a little bit more independent and work on your own instead of having to be part of that team or that unit. Getting those kinds of ideas and that sort of thinking, and having somebody internally know that there's a certain cry for help out there, is important.
Mhm.
So that's person number two. Person number three to talk to is somebody that you trust in HR. Somebody that you trust is a really important caveat to this, right? Because you have to remember that HR works for the organization, and that if you don't trust that person and have a good relationship with them, it's possible that the information could get back to your supervisor in a way that can be damaging, or that could create a retaliatory situation, which you definitely don't want to put yourself into the risk of having. But talking to HR to both say, this is what's going on with my boss. I just want to have this documented, is
Mhm.
important. getting their perspective or their coaching on, are there specific things I need to be doing differently to manage up in this situation or to protect myself in this situation, can be helpful. And HR typically has a bigger bird's eye view perspective of what's going on in the organization. And if they know that there is an opening coming up or somebody's going out on maternity leave and they need a backfill, they can oftentimes cherry pick you and say, hey, let's keep you in mind for this opportunity. Now, the fourth person to consult is yourself. It is looking at your gut, your intuition, and the instincts that are coming up for you about how to make the situation better. Because especially if you've done some soul searching, right? If you have gone through your 4 pillars of career fulfillment and you know what's out of whack and out of alignment, you can usually come up with some pretty workable ideas for what would make it feel better. And so if you allow your own deep sense of knowing to lead the ideation process, you may realize that the solution is much more straightforward than what you thought it was. It might be easier than you thought it was. Or you might realize that everything that you do within your organization might just be a triage, but what you're needing most is to leave the organization. Any sense of internal clarity like that can be so helpful and so needed to take an action path forward that feels like it is directionally correct.
Absolutely. And it's how we build our network, and we build our network with quality and trusted and respected people who are there to help us. And sometimes, as we wrap up here, we also look for a very impartial or an objective partner in these kind of relationships to help us. And that's where a coach can come in. And that's where having a coach to help kind of work through a lot of these issues to gain the kind of clarity and stuff that professionals want is not only a worthwhile investment in the immediacy, but obviously something we know that reaps a tremendous amount of ROI as you continue to progress through your career. I can't thank you enough for our conversation today. There's been so many great things that you have shared and we have talked about, and I'm going to make sure those all get captured in the show notes for people to take a look at. But before we go, I'd love for you to just share a little bit with my listeners about your book, where they can get in touch with you, how they can connect with you, and any other big things that you've got coming up. So please share.
Well, John, thank you so much for this. I mean, you and I do this work because we care so deeply about helping people have happier, healthier relationships with their work. So it's an honor to get to be here and to be with somebody who I know cares about this as much as I do. So
Exactly.
Thank you for the invitation. And for anybody who's listening to this who wants to dive into more of understanding their own 4 pillars and the methodology and how to think about coming up with some smart strategic hypotheses for what might be next for you, you can pick up a free preview copy of my book at getcareerclarity.com/book. It's also got links for where you can buy it in bookstores online nationwide. Or if you are a big podcast junkie, you can certainly go listen to the Career Clarity Show where I'm having John on too. So you can go find his episode. It'll be fabulous. Or if you just want to get more information, you can go to getcareerclarity.com to check out more.
Great. Lisa, thank you so very much. And, hopefully the weather's going to warm up a little bit soon and we won't be dealing with the cold and the snow and all those kind of things. But this definitely has warmed my day, and I really appreciate our conversation. So thank you so much. I hope everybody goes and gets that sample of your book and checks out your book and visits your website and learns more about you. So thank you again for spending some time today.
Thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you usually listen. If you haven't already, I'd appreciate it if you would leave me a rating and review to let me know what you think, to help others find this podcast and continue to bring you relevant and useful content to help you navigate what's next for your career. And if you're ready to create your mid-career GPS and get rid of the overwhelm so you can find the job you'll love or love the job you have, visit my website at johnneral.com for more information about joining my private Facebook group and scheduling a free consult with me so we can start building your mid-career GPS together. Don't forget to connect with me on LinkedIn and follow me on social at John Neral Coaching. I'll see you next time.